Welcome to the University of California webinars, Lab Safety webinar series. Today's presentation is going to be on creating safety cultures in academic institutions, the Safety Culture Task Force report from the American Chemical Society Committee on Chemical Safety. Today's webinar is being sponsored by the UC Center for Laboratory Safety. Today's presenter is Dr. Robert Hill. He is chair of the ACS Safety Culture Task Force and the Committee on Chemical Safety. Dr. Hill is a program manager with Battelle Memorial Institute in Atlanta, Georgia. Prior to this, he worked for 34 years at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and retired from the U.S. Public Health Service after 30 years. Dr. Hill and Dr. David Finster from Wittenberg University have recently written the first textbook on laboratory safety for undergraduates called Laboratory Safety for Chemistry Students. He also developed new concepts in safety, including the safety ethic, chemical safety levels, and a new chemical hazard classification system. With that, we're pleased to welcome Dr. Hill, and I will be, Dr. Hill, I'll give you the controls for the presentation.
Okay. Let's see here.
And there you go. Screen is up.
Is that there?
You're good.
Okay. Okay. Okay, let me back up. All right, well, first I want to thank E. Young and the UC Center for Laboratory Safety for giving me this opportunity to talk to you about one of my great passions, and that's laboratory safety, and then about how laboratory safety is influenced by safety culture. I am a chemist by training. I worked in research laboratories for more than 25 years until I decided to pursue my passion in safety. And so I tell you that because I want you to understand I believe certainly that research is exciting and a critically important part of our profession, and it's critically important to the world. And I will also tell you that I think safety must be an integral part of all laboratory work, including research. So in just a moment, I'm going to talk to you more about how to create a safety culture in an academic institution. But as we're talking about this, I'd like for you to consider how you view safety yourself and how you think your own institution views safety and what the safety culture is in your own institution as we're talking about this. And then I would also like for you to maybe even think about the institution from which you graduated, where you did your undergraduate work and your graduate work. What might be the safety culture there? So let me then continue with a story, and I always like to start with stories of incidents, and the incidents I'm going to talk about are all true. These are things that have actually happened, and not necessarily to me, but to other people, so I'll be talking about those. And you will notice that I call things incidents rather than accidents, because sometimes I think that when people hear the word accident, they in fact believe that this is something that's just sort of bad luck, that something happened. Whereas I believe that there's almost always preventable causes that we could have taken steps to minimize or prevent those incidents. So the first incident I'm going to talk about is called safety vaporized. And there was a graduate student who was conducting research in the laboratory, actually synthesis work, and he needed to purify a compound. He was using a technique called recrystallization, where you take a solid material and you dissolve it in a solvent, in a hot solvent, and then it cools and it comes back out of solution and it purifies that compound. Well, as he was going about his work, he was going to do this in the hood, but the hood was cluttered. And so he decided, well, I don't have time to clean this out. I'm just going to go work on an open bench. And so he used a hot plate that he had found. He had an open beaker that he put the material in, and he used ether for his solvent. And then he remembers, as he was doing this, the click of the thermostat as the hot plate came on, and then the whoosh, the big flash. And so there was a flash fire. As he staggered back, he found that all of the hair had been burned off his arm, the eyebrows had been burned off of his face, but as he staggered back and was trying to figure out what happened to him, he just happened to look forward, and what did he find? That he had forgotten, he'd been careless, he'd forgot to recap the ether, and now there was about a 6-inch flame coming from the top of the container of the ether. Well, luckily for him, another student happened to be there watching, and so that student came over and extinguished the fire. So why did this happen? Well, first, the hood was cluttered, and time was more important for safety. And so what he did next was what I call risky behavior. He did something that he should not have done. And it's clear the student did not have a good understanding of the need for good housekeeping, nor did he understand the conditions for a fire. And for those of you who perhaps know or have heard this before, this is the fire triangle. And if he had known about this, that there are 3 things required for the fire, perhaps he could have prevented this. But clearly he didn't recognize the hazard, and he wasn't thinking critically about safety. So he had a weak knowledge of safety, had certainly had a weak safety ethic. And so what we could have done to prevent this kind of incident was to have strong leadership in safety, to teach students laboratory and chemical safety, to build a strong safety ethic, to learn lessons from incidents and near misses. And by the way, this was what we call a near miss. So, skipping too far. Now let me go back now and talk about the concerns about safety in academia. I'm sure many of you know about these. Many of them highly publicized, that incidents have happened in academic laboratories that have caused serious injuries, fatalities, extensive damage. There have been observations, too, that chemistry graduate students lack strong safety skills, and there are calls for changes in the academic safety culture and the safety educational process. At the same time, there have been government investigations about these incidents. Of course, I'm sure all of you are familiar with the Cal OSHA investigation of the UCLA incident and the investigation of the Texas Tech incident by the U.S. Chemical Safety Board, and then the criminal charges that have been filed, that were filed against the university administrators and the principal investigator. And all this made our academic colleagues wonder, well, what can we do and how can we prevent these incidents? And so the Committee on Chemical Safety began to hear all of these concerns, and so we decided we would try to do something to help. And so what we decided to do was form the Safety Culture Task Force with the goal to develop guidance or suggestions or recommendations that could help strengthen or build a safety culture in 2- or 4-year undergraduate programs, graduate schools, postdoctoral programs. And we would do this by identifying the best elements of the safety culture and the best practices for a strong safety culture. And so we invited a number of organizations within the ACS. These are the organizations that participated in this. And these are the members of the Safety Culture Task Force, but one important thing I'd like for you to note is that 6 of the 9 members of this task force were from academia, and we believed it was critically important that the academic community have a strong voice in putting this report together. So let's talk then about what is a strong safety culture. And we looked around in different places, and what we found was that the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission reported that it was a reflection of values which are shared throughout the organization and which are based upon the belief that safety is important and it's everybody's responsibility, and that an organization's collective commitment by leaders and individuals to emphasize safety as an overriding priority to other competing goals and other considerations is needed to ensure the protection of the people and the environment. Oops, hold on, something's going on here. Let's see. There we go. All right. Now, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission also recognized traits of a strong safety culture, and they said that leadership shows commitment to safety, that if there's safety problems, they're identified and they're resolved, and that all personnel take responsibility for safety and accountability for safety, and that the process of planning work is implemented in such a way that safety is considered in the work and safety is maintained, that there's always continuous learning through the process, and then it's a positive, non-punitive environment for raising safety concerns. So if somebody brings up a concern, they feel like they can do that without being having some kind of retribution brought against them for bringing those concerns up. And then having effective safety communications, a respectful and work environment, and a questioning attitude. Well, OSHA also believes that the best way to prevent incidents is to have a strong safety culture, and they note that in organizations that have strong safety cultures that there are few at-risk behaviors, low incident rate, low employee turnover, and low absenteeism, and much higher productivity because employees know that safety is important and is going to be taken care of, and that these organizations are essentially successful in all areas of business. So now the National Research Council published a publication many years ago called Prudent Practices in the Laboratory, and it was recently updated in 2011, but they had some things to say about the safety culture. Now what you should know is that the committee that did this is composed largely of people that are working in academia also. So these are the things coming from academia, and that is the ultimate responsibility for encouraging safety rests with the head of the organization, with the leaders, and that teaching safety and safe work practices has to be a priority for faculty as they prepare students for their career. And so by promoting safety in the undergraduate years and in the graduate years, the faculty will have a significant impact not only on their students, but on everybody else who has to work with those students in the future. And then the next thing is the ability to identify and assess hazards in the laboratory is not a skill that comes naturally. It has to be taught and encouraged, and I'm going to talk more about that in just a little while. Forming a lifelong foundation of safety consciousness and risk assessment and prudent practices, all part of the scientific education, and teaching and academic institutions need to accept the responsibility for building this safety attitude. Now, on the Safety Culture Task Force, those that are working in the academic community themselves identified these barriers to a strong safety culture, and that is that sometimes safety is thought of as a low priority, it's fragmented, that the supervision of safety sometimes is lacking, and responsibilities and accountabilities are not clear, that there's inadequate safety education, and oftentimes a lack of instructional materials, that as undergraduates advance through their curriculum, there's a very incoherent program of safety. And some people in academia see safety as a set of rules or regulations and not really an ethical obligation or an essential part of the curriculum. And other reasons are in-sources or time allocated for safety, and then safety training or education of other faculty or staff and advanced students is missing. a systematic review of incidents is missing, and collaborative interactions with others are missing. So those are all barriers that have been identified by those working in academia. So the task force then identified 7 elements that they believe are really critically important to building a strong safety culture. And you see these 7 elements here: learning from incidents, education safety, a positive attitude for safety, leadership and safety, institutional support, collaborative interactions, and promoting safety. Now, there are 7, but I can tell you there are 3 that are really critically important to this, and that is leadership and safety, education and safety, and if we do those right, that leads to a positive attitude in safety. And so we're going to be talking more about that as we go along. Safety and leadership, safety leadership and management is really critically important to this. I can't emphasize enough about leaders, and we're talking about leaders from the top. So we're talking about presidents or chancellors or deans, department heads, faculty, those people who are over students and influence students. Those are your leaders, and so they need to lead by example. And I love this quote by Albert Schweitzer, which is, example is not the only thing influencing I can't see this. Hold on. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It said the example is not the main thing influencing others. It's the only thing. And I think that's exactly right. So leading by example is critically important because it inspires others to value safety. And when you seek open communications and build trust, people feel like they can talk to you about safety. So there's an active commitment to safety. But I will tell you the other thing is true. If you don't lead, set a good example by safety, the opposite thing is going to happen too. Well, in the academic community, the authority flows somewhat like this from the president or chancellor to the provost, to college deans, department chairs, and then to the faculty, the PIs, and the staff. But while there's that line of authority, it's not always observed or enforced. Department chairs and senior faculty and research directors, PIs, they are there to set the tone for safety, and so they're responsible and accountable for safety. They ensure that the faculty and staff and all those people who are teaching and overseeing safety are educated in safety, and they ensure that if they're new faculty, that they're mentored in safety. At the same time, they are also responsible for safety education. That is to ensure that the students develop strong safety skills and they have strong safety ethics, that they learn how to apply the principles of safety throughout the curriculum. You can learn the principles of safety, but then you have to learn to apply those. And if you continue to reinforce those throughout the curriculum, then you're going to build strong safety skills in your students. So they need to continually learn about safety during all of their laboratories so that when they finish their undergraduate work, that they're able then to work independently in laboratories because they're able to have the knowledge and safety that they need to have. They need to think critically about safety. They'll be able to do that. So these are the recommendations then that we had for leadership, and we had a total of 17 recommendations. And so I'd like for you to think about each one of these things, and if you give us feedback for these, we'd like to know. But the first is to establish clear lines of authority for safety, to develop a safety policy that includes lab safety, and establishing safety responsibilities and job descriptions and performance plans of all employees. And then to encourage that every leader become a proponent of safety and of safety education, and to be able to demonstrate this care for safety in their actions by their example to their other staff members and to students. And then lastly, but also very important, to establish a strong and effective safety management program at your institution, which includes lab safety. All right, I got another story for you. It's called What You Don't Know. And this is about a new employee, not working in academia, working outside of academia, but is a brand new graduate, just arrived. And one of the first things this new employee was to do, this new graduate, was to prepare some formalin. And so they were doing this, and they spilt the formalin in the sink. But they didn't clean it up, Tori. Well, another employee entered the laboratory, and as that employee was working, they began to cough, having difficulty breathing, and pretty soon that employee decided, something's wrong, and they staggered out into the hallway crying for help. And so other people ran into the hallway and were able to call a clinic. There was a clinic on site. And the clinic came over, and they brought some oxygen. They got that person in such a state that they could transport them to a hospital. An ambulance came. And then over time, that person did recover, but it turned out that person had become sensitized to formalin. And so that employee was no longer able to do their work. So what you don't know, well, what happened? Well, it's clear that new employee did not recognize the hazard. They lacked the knowledge in laboratory and chemical safety. They had a weak safety ethic. They didn't think critically about safety. Seems like we've heard this before. As a consequence, this time, another person was injured. Not the person that did this, but another person. And they lost their ability to work in the lab because of the incident. Now, preventing this kind of incident is what we've mentioned before, to teach students laboratory and chemical safety, to build a strong safety ethic through continuous learning of safety, and leadership having strong interest in safety. So this is what the task force had to say about safety, about teaching laboratory and chemical safety, that undergraduates need to be taught safety throughout the curriculum. It needs to be in a continuous and spiral manner, which means that it becomes increasingly more complex. So freshmen would not necessarily understand everything about safety because they don't have that knowledge of chemistry yet. But as time goes on, in later sessions on safety, they learn more and more complex things about safety in greater detail. And so as that goes on, then they begin to build the kind of knowledge and skills they need in safety. Well, if we enable students to understand safety principles and how to apply those, then we should also be teaching safeties how to think critically about safety. Now, the best teaching approaches, the task force believed, was to teach safety topics in every laboratory session throughout the entire 4 years period of time. Now, some academic institutions may not believe that that's the best way to do things. There could be other ways to do this. Perhaps there could be a standalone safety course. Then there are questions about, well, when would you teach this? I would say maybe what you do is you have sessions about safety early in the curriculum where they're freshmen in the first and second years, and then maybe have a good basic laboratory course in the third year, maybe an advanced safety course in the fourth year. So there are different approaches to doing this, and the point is that we did say that certainly it's the approach, best approach, whatever's for the institution. Now, this is something that I'm hoping that all of you will remember, and these are what I call the 4 organizing principles of safety, and that is, remember the acronym RAMP. Ramp up for safety. If you don't remember anything else out of this presentation, remember RAMP. RAMP stands for recognize hazards, assess the risk of hazards, minimize the risk of hazards, and prepare for emergencies. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about each one of those. The first one is recognizing hazards. Now, if you'll notice, there are a lot of topics here that should be taught in this area about recognizing hazards. But I can tell you this is the most important thing that anybody can do in the laboratory when they do it. That is to be able to recognize the hazards. And so there's a lot to be learned. And for example, I can tell you, if I just pick one of these, for instance, flammables, well, there are a lot of things you need to know about flammables. What are the characteristics of flammables? What other, let's see, what are fire hazard ratings? What are the conditions for a fire? What kind of structure-activity relationships are there for things that are flammable? So a lot of things that you could be teaching about flammables, and that goes for each one of these other topics that are here. So there's a lot to be learned about recognizing hazards. In the same way, assessing the risk of hazards is also critically important. And these are some of the topics that would be covered here. And I'm not going to go over all of these topics. I'm just flashing through these. But you will find these topics listed in the report in Table 1. So if you want to know more about that, look in Table 1 and you'll find a list of these topics. Now, the next topic is minimizing the risk of hazards. And by the way, let's go back to assessing risk of hazards. This is another important skill. And remember at the very beginning when I talked about what the National Academy said is recognizing hazards and then assessing the risk of those are skills that need to be taught. So they're very important critical skills that students need to have when they graduate. Now the next thing is minimizing the risk of hazards. And of all the things that we're doing, this is probably the thing that we probably know the best. There are probably many kinds of ways that we know how to protect ourselves from various risks and various ways to manage those if we take advantage of those and use those. So I think this is probably the thing we can use the best, but there's a lot to be learned about all of those too. And then the last thing is preparing for emergencies. And I will tell you that in my experience, no matter how much you try to minimize the incidents, you're going to have, if you work in a laboratory long enough, something is going to happen. Either something's going to happen to you or something's going to happen to one of your neighbors. So you need to be prepared to respond for emergencies. So this is the other part of the 4 principles, and that is being prepared for emergencies. And this actually is something you shouldn't take trivial. It takes a lot of preparation to be ready to do this. Now, before we leave this topic, the next important thing to know is that the teachers and researchers need to have a good understanding of safety themselves. So there needs to be a safety education process of some kind for faculty, graduate students, teaching assistants, postdoctoral scholars who oversee laboratories or who work in laboratories, lab managers and coordinators. There needs to be some kind of course or instruction for them so they have a good understanding of safety. Now, the task force also identified a fair number of resources for preparing laboratory safety lessons, and those are found in Table 2 in the report. So if you look at those, you'll be able to find some of those resources that we identified, and perhaps there could be more if you know about resources that are not there. We'd certainly like to know about those. Now, before I leave this topic, one of the things that we were asked to do is by the U.S. Chemical Safety Board, and that's we being the American Chemical Society, out of the investigation for the Texas Tech explosion, out of their investigation, they came to the ACS and they asked us, they had identified as a gap, that is that there was a good tool to help researchers working in academia to assess the risk of their hazards. And so they asked us if we could help them in this vein by identifying tools that were good to be used in the academic research community. And so we actually have a task force now that's under the leadership of Kim Jesty at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and that task force is working on identifying these hazard assessment tools. And so you'll be hearing more about that later on toward the end of this year or early next year when that report begins to come out. And when it does come out, we'll also be putting those tools on our website, so it will make them available to the whole academic community. So the recommendations then were ensuring that graduating undergraduates have strong skills in laboratory safety and strong safety ethics by teaching safety throughout the curriculum over and over and over and over again, just in the same way that you teach chemistry over and over and over again. You build that strong safety ethic in your students. And so this is one of our recommendations, that we build these strong safety ethics, and we build this strong knowledge in safety in these undergraduates. And as I indicated, the topics are found in Table 1. And then ensuring that the faculty and staff and graduate students and students who are all involved in teaching or managing or overseeing those students have the knowledge that they need to have in safety. And then to implement a hazard analysis procedure for all lab work. All right, next I'd like to turn to the next element with safety attitudes and awareness and ethics. Now, positive attitude towards safety is critical. And you'll see that one of our forefathers there, Thomas Jefferson, said, nothing can stop the man with the right attitude from achieving his goal, and nothing on earth can help the man with the wrong attitude. Well, you know, to me, negative or ambivalent attitudes towards safety put all of us at risk. So building a positive attitude towards safety requires that safety is really important, that repeated and continuous education about safety is needed over the long term, and that working under leadership that emphasizes the importance of safety is really important, and then being accountable for safety. Another important thing which we recommend is what's called the safety ethic, and the safety ethic says that I value safety, work safely, prevent at-risk behavior, promote safety, and accept responsibility for safety. Now this is sort of a goal, some sort of personal code that one might adopt. So what does that mean? Well, to value safety means that safety is something that's not going to be compromised by changing priorities. It's something that you're always going to consider when you're doing your work. By working safely means that you are educated in safety and that you're striving to learn more about safety all the time, and you're using RAMP that we talked about using. Preventing at-risk behavior. Well, let's go back to the first incident that I talked about where the graduate student had the fire with the ether. Well, one of the things he was doing was not working in the hood. Well, you know what? That's risky behavior. And he did other things. He was careless, didn't put the top back on the container. So all of those things are what we call at-risk behavior. Not wearing proper PPE in the laboratory is risky behavior. There are a lot of things that cause incidents, and at-risk behavior is one of those. So promoting safety is another part of that. It is setting an example for others. I can't emphasize that enough. It's so important to set a good example for others in teaching others about safety, and then accepting responsibility for safety. So the recommendations then, the next set of recommendations are to build awareness and caring for safety by emphasizing safety throughout the entire curriculum. So that's how you build that awareness. You know, if you just do safety once in a while, you're not going to build that strong safety ethic. You have to continue to pound away at that safety, teaching about safety throughout the entire curriculum. Another thing that we recommended is that in our grant proposal, researchers might think about including in their plans safety education for their students and grad students and postdoctoral fellows so that that they're better prepared. And if you have that in your grant proposal, then that might also assist you in getting your grant. And then last, to adopt this personal credo, this safety ethic that I talked about. All right, now I'm going to talk about another incident. Actually, these are two back-to-back incidents, and you'll see why in just a moment. But this first one is called "Smoke Gets in Your Eyes." Now, this happened to be an incident that happened to me, so this is something that I know very much about. I was working in a laboratory across the hall from another lab, and we both had our doors open, so I could see into the lab across the hall. And as a student was cleaning up his lab, he had some benzene that had been dried with sodium wire. And for those who work in synthesis, sometimes to get very, very dry solvents, they take sodium metal, extrude it into a solvent, and then that makes for very dry solvent. But before you pour this into the sink, you need to make sure that the sodium has been destroyed, because sodium has a sort of a nasty habit of catching on fire. Well, it turned out as this student was pouring this into the sink that the sodium was still active. It caught on fire. It caught the benzene on fire, and benzene burns with a very, very black, sooty smoke. And when I just happened to look across the hall, about the upper 3/4 of the room were filled with black, sooty smoke. But all I could see were these legs at the bottom of the room there, and so it's sort of unforgettable, sort of surrealistic kind of scene with these pair of legs just walking around without a body in this smoky room. Well, it turns out that the fire was extinguished. There were no injuries, no significant damage, and this is what we call a near miss. Well, let's go to our next incident. Now, this is called Not Again, and this is actually a story that was in Chemical Engineering News. There were a lot of news media about this. It was in 1996. A graduate student was cleaning his lab, and guess what? He thought he had destroyed some sodium with alcohol, and he poured the residue in the sink, and lo and behold, the sodium was still alive. It ignited in the water. It turned out there were other solvents nearby, and they caught on fire also. And so as a result of that, one lab was completely destroyed, and 2 other labs were heavily damaged. And one of the worst things that happened out of this is the students and the postdocs all lost their notes, their chemical products, their equipment. Now, if you were in graduate school, and I was at one of you were too, this is just devastating. You just can't believe how terrible this is to have lost all of those notes, all that documentation that you had about your research, and these guys lost all of this stuff. Well, this wasn't all that happened. As a consequence of this lab fire, there was $400,000 in damage from this fire. Well, in a way, they were somewhat fortunate because there was a scheduled renovation, which is going to cost about $6.2 million to those very laboratories and to other ones there. So it's like, okay, well, I might take care of it. However, there was intense media coverage about this, and guess what? The fire department said, you know what? There's something wrong here. We've had repeated incidents from you guys, and you're not taking care of business. You are no longer the victim here. You're the problem. And so what they said was, we're unwilling to put our firefighters at risk from now on. So when you have another fire, we're just going to have what's called defensive containment. That is, we're just going to sit around and watch the building burn down to the ground. And that's what their public stance was. Well, of course, that created a huge media frenzy over this stuff. And the fire department said, but you know, you could fix this if you did all of these things, and they had a list of things to do. And it turned out then that the university system finally had to say, okay, we got to take care of this business. And so as a result of that, it now cost them $30.2 million. Well, this is a pretty expensive incident. And as you will see, if they had learned from a previous incident, and I don't know any way they would learn about this from a previous incident, but You know, learning from past incidents is an important way to learn about safety. And so it's important when laboratory incidents occur, and this is another one of our elements, to determine what the direct and indirect and root causes of these incidents were. And of course, this depends on the seriousness of the incident or the seriousness of the near miss. And then identify measures that can minimize or prevent future incidents. And then you can actually use those incidents as teaching tools for your students. And students really like these incidents, by the way. They listen to them intently, and so they will, if they don't remember other things, they will remember those incidents. And I will bet that some of you after this broadcast may not remember a lot of what I said, but you'll remember a lot of these incidents that I talked about. So it's important then to establish an incident for reporting and investigating and sharing information about incidents. Now, the academic institution, I can tell you what's really important here, and listen to this. It's not just keeping track of incidents for employees, which is a requirement of the law, but you need to keep a track of the incidents caused that involve students, because there are many incidents of students, and so you can learn a lot about these incidents if you keep track of student incidents too. So it should include all incidents and all near misses, and then the incidents and lessons learned need to be shared. So our recommendations then are about this, or to establish and maintain an incident reporting system, an incident investigation system, an incident database that's available, that's not only for employees, but it's also for students. And this is available to a wide range of people. You could establish an internal review process of incident that might be the safety committee, might look at those so you learn from those and see if you can glean from those lessons so that you can hopefully prevent things from happening in the future. And then think about publishing or sharing those lessons in some way, maybe on your website or a public website, or maybe in a journal, maybe in a seminar. But there are ways that you can share those. And I will tell you that the ACS, particularly Division of Chemical Health and Safety, is interested in developing some kind of database about incidents and learning from incidents, some kind of database on this. And so it's sort of in the formative stages now, so if you've got suggestions for that, we'd certainly like to know about those too. We can share those with the division through the Committee on Chemical Safety. All right, another important thing that you need to do is to have strong collaborative interactions. And these collaborative interactions should be campus-wide, so different departments are collaborating with each other about safety. And it's important because chemistry departments could help art departments, or biology departments, or vice versa. Biology departments might help chemistry departments. Anyway, there are ways that you can collaborate. Now, in some institutions, there is a system of safety councils and committees where at the highest level, members from different departments are represented on a panel with a top council, and they develop overall policies and then oversee the safety efforts of all the other safety committees. And then there are safety committees for various things, laboratory safety, chemical safety. Maybe there's one for the department safety. Anyway, they all review matters involving safety, and they review incidents. And so this is a good system of collaborative interactions that are needed as part of a safety culture. Another important thing is to collaborate with your EH&S if you have an EH&S department, and many institutions do. Some of the smaller ones do not, but many do. And if you do have those EH&S departments, you need to work with those people as partners. Now, you know what? I worked as a research chemist for many years, but then I went to work in a health and safety office. And I can tell you, while many people regarded us as partners, there are others that regarded us as police. And so it's very important that you know that your EH&S department is out to help you. They want to be your partner in trying to help you do the right thing and trying to give you the advice that you need to have a strong safety program. So it's good to partner with them. Now the last thing I want to mention here is to have a strong relationship with your emergency responders. What do you think would have happened if the Texas incident that I talked about, if they'd had a strong relationship with their emergency responders, then perhaps all of that would not have happened. Perhaps there had been a different turn of events. So it's very important to establish a strong working relationship with your emergency responders. Invite them in, talk to them about what you're doing, inform them. So this is another important step in collaborative interactions. So the recommendations then are to establish a series of councils and committees that have to do with safety and ensure that these report all the way up through the hierarchy of the institution, that there's a close working relationship with EHS at every department level, and that you have a strong working relationship with emergency responders. The next element is promoting and communicating safety, and that is, promote safety through personal example. And you're going to hear me say this over and over again. It's so important. There's a leader. Everybody's watching. Those students are watching you. So if you do things that are not safe, they are watching and they're picking that up. So it's very important to lead through example. It's also great to have programs that promote safety, advertising, safety reports, posters, all sorts of things like that. Safety seminars are a really great way to do this. Safety week. Another important thing is to recognize individuals for following safety processes. Now, with recognition is something you've got to be very careful with. A lot of people don't like to be publicly recognized for doing something, particularly safety. Somebody might pick on them about this. So it's important that you just go up to them personally, shake their hand and say, you know what, I just want to tell you what a great job you're doing in safety. And you know what, they will appreciate that, and that's the way that you can promote safety on a personal basis. Another way you might is solicit suggestions for improving safety and identifying safety concerns. And once again, those need to be non-punitive things. Now I'm going to tell you about a story that's related to this, and it's called How Do You Start a Fire? And at Battelle, where I work now, we do something called management safety observations. And in this case, the managers go to our laboratory scientists and we say, okay, just tell us what you're doing. Explain your work to us, what kind of hazards you have here, how you're minimizing those. It's done in a very friendly, very, very friendly, non-confrontational thing. And it's made to make the employee aware that you care about their safety, that you're there just to ask them about your work and try to understand things. Well, we were doing this in one of our laboratories, and we learned about a change in our analytical method where we're doing this, and it turned out in this incident, if you will, it's not really an incident, but during this process, that they were using a heating block, but it was giving very uneven heating. So they decided that they would take these vials, which were filled with solvent, where they were generating a reaction that needed heat. They moved that process to an oven. But as we observed the oven, it became evident that that oven was not a spark-proof oven. And when we asked them if those vials leaked sometime and they had flammable solvents in it, the answer was yes. So we use that as a teaching moment, if you will, to talk to them about how to prevent a fire and explosion. And so I talked about a fire triangle that I talked about earlier. That's what we use that opportunity to talk to them about that. At the same time, I might note we also found that there was a refrigerator, ordinary refrigerator. They were storing test tubes that were filled with flammable solvents that were not capped. They were just put in these refrigerators. And so that, once again, was a hazard, and we worked with them to correct that also. So the recommendation then, and if you will, this management safety observations is just another way to promote safety. So promoting safety means to establish some kind of system to promote safety, and it could be through electronic communications or printed materials or some kind of recognition system for good safety performance. But there should be a way to promote safety. And then lastly, but certainly this is an important element also, and that is to encourage institutional support for funding. Because if you're going to have new or innovative approaches to building safety culture, perhaps you might want to hire consultants, or if you don't have EH&S people, maybe you want to hire some EHS people. But all of these have reoccurring costs for information technology, for the incident tracking system, or chemical inventory, or waste management. All of those have reoccurring costs, and so you need to identify what those costs are. And so our recommendation is to identify the ongoing need to support a strong safety culture, and then work with administrators and department chairs to establish a baseline budget to support these activities. All right, so once again you'll see we've talked about these 7 important elements to develop a strong safety culture, and we believe all of these go together in a package. And so we've given you 17 recommendations that we believe will help you develop a strong safety culture. And so we're hoping that this has been of help to all of you, and so that's been the desire of the safety culture course all along, that we were here to help our academic colleagues. And so we're going to ask you for feedback about the recommendations, about the safety culture elements. You know, but now before I quit, I want to tell you about one other passion that I have, and I have this passion for my grandchildren. I have 5 grandchildren. I have a grandson who's going to turn 13 in about 5 days. And he is, to say he's interested in science is an understatement. He is super interested in science. And I work with him frequently. I'm a member of Science Olympiad. I'm a coach with him. So he's very interested in science. I have 4 granddaughters. One of my 8-year-old granddaughters is super interested in science also. And so I want them to pursue this interest in science, and I want them at the same time to develop strong skills in laboratory safety, so that when they go into the laboratory, if they choose that profession, that they're going to be safe. And so I hope that you have that same interest in safety for your children and for our grandchildren, so when it comes to the future, that we can incorporate safety into the educational process. So the Committee on Chemical Safety welcomes, if you will, comments on the elements of the safety culture. We ask for comments about the recommendations. If there are other safety education topics that we don't know about, let us know what those might be. If there are other safety education resources we don't know about, we'd like to know about those. And I will tell you something that's really important to all of us, and that is we need to know people who are doing a lot of these recommendations now. We want to highlight those people as being what we might call bright spots, those people that are really doing a good job. And so if we can find those people, then maybe all of us can talk to them and find out what they're doing and how they're doing that. So if you have ideas about that, we'd certainly like to know about that. And if you have ideas about ideas or suggestions about implementing recommendations or other ways to help build strong safety culture, we'd like to know about that. And last, here is the information to contact us. You can send this to safety@acs.org. And to the if you look on the safety website, by the way, which is listed here, you'll be able to find a electronic copy of the Creating Safety Cultures in Academic Institutions. So I think at this point, I think I turn this back over to our moderator, I believe.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Thank you, Dr. Hill. That was an excellent presentation. And we actually have a number of questions that we'd like to ask you that have either been posted in the questions section or in the chat section of this webinar. So I encourage others to do so as well here. Let me just start with the questions as they come in. One of our first questions here is, what recommendations do you have for fostering accountability with students? Students do not have the same employee relationship with their supervisor, with periodic performance reviews, paycheck consequences, etc. It's challenging to get their attention. Do you have any comments on that?
Oh yes, I do. In fact, what I think is, at least personally, now I will tell you that I think the way to do this is through this continuous education in safety. That is, every time you have a lab session, every lab session, you do a burp about safety. And so after a while, they begin to get the idea that safety is important. If you do this over and over and over and over again for every lab session, then after a while, they begin to get the idea that this is important, that it is something that they need to take care of business. And so, you know, doing that and then being diligent about trying to ensure that they are doing the right things, and when they do the right things, to go in and compliment them, saying, you know, I appreciate you doing this kind of thing. So that's what sort of be my answer to this, and you know, what that requires then is that in many academic institutions you change the way that you're approaching safety, because in order to teach safety throughout this process, where it's little bits of information about safety in each lab session, and then that continues to get more complex over time, so that by the end of the 4 years they're learning about very complex things about safety. But it's the kind of thing that I think we just need to revamp sometimes, that the way that we approach safety. So that sort of be my answer to this.
One of the chemical hygiene officers on the webinar here writes that I have concerns about a safety recognition program that rewards people for accident and incident history. Do you have some suggestions for a recognition program that might be a leading indicator for safety culture?
Well, you know, I sort of have my same concerns about recognizing for safety. As I indicated before, you know, just with me, there are a lot of people who don't like to be recognized in public, and particularly sometimes if you recognize people in safety, and while this is not always true, but sometimes people might turn out to be negative for them to be recognized for safety. So, I mean, I guess I'm more of the feeling that to recognize people, you need to talk with them about safety and to recognize the good things they're doing for the safety process. Now, the problem is if you're recognizing people according to some kind of safety metric, like the people who've had the fewest number of incidents or those kinds of things, you know, what happens is people won't report incidents because they don't want to have these adverse things. They want to be recognized for doing good things, so they just end up not reporting incidents. So I'm not a believer in recognizing organizations by these kind of metrics. I mean, to me, it can send, I don't know if it sends the wrong message, but it certainly can push things underground that you need to know about.
Okay. We have 3 questions that are somewhat related here, although each is different. They all deal with the relationship between safety and principal investigators in an academic environment. Let me ask you the first question here. It comes from a member within EH&S. What can that person do to help facilitate the working relationship with PIs or instructors?
I guess the thing that you can do is, the one thing you got to do is build a personal relationship with those people. You need to go visit them, talk with them, try to understand what they are doing, and then when they tell you, well, you know, you don't really know what I'm doing, I said, well, why don't you explain it to me? So you try to have a better understanding about what they're doing, and have some exchange of information. Now, I can tell you, you know what, I worked in health and safety, so I know sometimes this works, sometimes it does not. But you have to keep trying at this, and if you get the right person, and sometimes maybe it takes working with the whole team, say a whole department or something like that is an overall thing to get those people on your side, then maybe those people who are not on your side will begin to say, well, okay, you know, it looks like maybe they're trying to help us. So I do understand that, but I think it comes down to building strong personal relationships with all of your PIs.
So the next question that might have a similar answer is, how do you change the mindset of a principal investigator who doesn't believe in wearing PPE or following safety guidelines?
Well, that's a tough thing to do, but you know, if an institution really is interested in safety, they have to find a way to work with that principal investigator to get them to understand that they're a leader in safety, whether they like it or not. Now, maybe that means working with the department chair or going up the chain to get them to help in the program to let them know that this is important for them to do and that they're expected to do this. One of the things that we talked about is having responsibilities included in job descriptions and in performance plans. So, and if you're in industry or outside of academia, I can tell you this is virtually commonplace that everybody's work performance plan has safety in it. And so, you know, while it's not always good to penalize people for some things, if the PIs have in their performance plan that they're supposed to be taking care of safety and they're not putting on their safety glasses or not doing what they're supposed to, then their performance plan is going to be downgraded.
Another kind of comment follow-up from a question similar to that mentions the challenge to get buy-in from faculty who are too busy to safely train their students or their technicians. Instead, they pass the responsibility on to graduate students. How do you see that is that an operable way to manage safety in the laboratory, or is it a less preferred method?
Well, it's certainly less preferred. I mean, it'd be better if we could get the faculty to take responsibility and do this too, but I also recognize sometimes that doesn't happen. But I always look at things as opportunities. You know, if you have an opportunity then to work with these graduate students, then you know what, they can have a great influence too. But you know, now's the time, and that would be a time to influence them, to bring them up, so that over time, and I guess I look at this changing safety culture as something that's going to take time. And so over time, if we begin to train particularly the younger ones that are coming through, the undergraduates and the graduate students, in the right way to do safety, then I think, at least I hope, that they will begin to catch on. So when they become faculty, they themselves then will begin to recognize how important safety is, and they will be more proactive in safety. So that's how I would think about it.
Okay. One other question we have here in kind of the global reach here, has the ACS reached out to other professional organizations such as SWE, engineering societies, the ACIHE, IMPO, or others to kind of raise this important message about academia to other agencies?
Well, I think that certainly some of the members with, for instance, I'm also a member of the Division of Chemical Health and Safety, and we have other organizations that have liaisons to the ACS, including like AIHA and the Chemical Engineers, the American Institute of Chemical Engineers, and certainly I will tell you that many of those are certainly aware of the issues in academia when it comes to safety, and anyone that's associated with industry, or most people that associate with the industry, all have the idea that safety in academia needs to be strengthened, that we need to find a way to make the graduates more knowledgeable, because when they come to the industry or wherever they're working, or the government lab, wherever, they oftentimes just don't have the knowledge they need to have. And so many of them are aware of these things. Whether we talk specifically to them about this report, some of them know about that, but I'm not sure we did anything that was systematic to talk to them. But we'd certainly like to know about those organizations. If you think there are some that we should contact or discuss this with, we'd certainly like to hear about those.
And kind of a follow-up question to your response on that last one, and it's actually something I've been wondering here as well, reading through the Chemical Safety Board's report, is do you know the current status or the efforts that are being made to approach this with the funding agencies? For example, the National Science Foundation or the National Institutes of Health and other granting agencies. Are they going to begin to require implementation of safety programs or an assurance of safety programs as part of their awarding of those funding sources?
You know, I guess I don't know the answer to that exactly, except I have talked to some of them, and one of the things that bothers me, that I worry about, is if you make a requirement in these grant applications for safety, what's going to happen is just going to become boilerplate. You know, they're just going to devise these sections on safety, and when they put the grant proposal together, they're going to say, all right, let's put that insert here on safety, and then they'll see this safety is done. This is not what we want to do. We want them to actually take an active role in trying to incorporate safety into their work. So I don't know what these funding agencies exactly are going to do, but some of them sort of have the same view that I do, that all it's going to do is add a little boilerplate to things if we have some of these kind of requirements. Now, maybe it would work in some cases. It probably depends on how active that funding institution is in trying to get them to follow what they say they're going to do.
Okay. Well, Dr. Hill, I on behalf of the University of California and the UC Center for Laboratory Safety that had sponsored this webinar, would like to thank you for your presentation here. I think your discussion was right on the money from the number of comments that have been posted to the board here, just reiterating or showing support for the messages that you had said. So again, thank you very much, and thank you for the more than 160 attendees that attended us here today. We appreciate it. I would like to just mention before we do sign off here that we do have a next seminar scheduled for next week here, and I'll put up that details on the screen here. Our next seminar that we're going to offer is actually going to be Dr. Bob Emery, who will be talking with us from the University of Texas Health Sciences campus, and he is going to be talking on the importance of developing a safety committee at the universities. So hopefully you'll be sent an invite. If you attended this meeting here, we certainly will send an invite to make certain that you get invited to that presentation as well. So with that, I'll sign off here for everybody here. And again, Dr. Hill, thank you very much for your presentation today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.